Have you ever heard of a ruler who was so powerful that his enemies called him the Magnificent, but his own people called him the Lawgiver? Well, today, we're diving into the incredible life of Sultan Suleiman I, the man who was the architect of the Ottoman Empire's golden age. So let's just unpack these two names for a second, because they tell you everything you need to know. To Europe, he was this terrifying, magnificent conqueror, an unstoppable force whose armies were literally hammering at the gates of the continent. But back home, to the millions in his own empire, he was Kanuni, the lawgiver, a brilliant statesman who brought justice and order to this massive, sprawling realm. So, one man, two completely different legacies, how is that even possible? How can one person be both of those things at the same time? Well, that's the central puzzle we're going to solve together in this explainer. Here's our roadmap. We're going to follow Suleiman's journey from the battlefields to the palace, looking at his military genius, his game-changing legal reforms, the cultural explosion he kicked off, and yeah, even the dark, juicy secrets of his court. So let's set the scene. It's 1520, and Suleiman takes the throne at just 26 years old. Now, he inherited a pretty powerful empire, for sure, but over the next 46 years, he would forge it into a true global superpower, stretching all the way from the heart of Europe to the deserts of Arabia. To really get who this guy was, you've got to start with the warrior. So let's look at the conquests that earned him that famous title, the Magnificent, in the eyes of all his rivals. And just look at this timeline. The pace is absolutely breathtaking. In his first decade alone, bam, he takes Belgrade, a fortress nobody could crack for a century. Then boom, he seizes the island of Rhodes, basically giving him control of the Mediterranean. He completely crushes the Kingdom of Hungary and then marches his armies right up to the gates of Vienna itself. You can't overstate the shockwaves this sent across all of Europe. And here's a little detail that shows you the insane power of his military machine. You see that number? Less than 2 hours. That's how long it took Suleiman's army to totally annihilate the entire Hungarian army at the Battle of Mohacs. In the time it takes you to watch a movie, an entire kingdom was effectively erased from the map. But all that conquering, that was really only half the story. To get the other side of Suleiman's legacy, the one his own people actually celebrated, we have to look at what he was building back home. This is where he becomes Kanuni, the lawgiver. Okay, think of it like this. Before Suleiman, the empire's laws were a total mess, a confusing jumble of different rules that changed from one town to the next. What he did was create a single, unified legal system for everyone, the Kanuni. It brought a whole new level of order and fairness to millions of people, from the poorest farmer to the richest merchant. He and his legal team were like master architects. They took these old, crumbling legal structures and built something totally new, a magnificent system of law and order. It masterfully blended secular and religious law into a framework so strong it would last for centuries. This, right here, was his true masterpiece. But Suleiman's vision went way beyond just battlefields and courtrooms. He was a huge supporter of the arts, and his reign sparked this absolutely dazzling golden age of Ottoman culture. I mean, under his watch, the legendary architect Sinan built jaw-dropping masterpieces, like the Süleymaniye Mosque, that still dominates the Istanbul skyline today. Arts like miniature painting, ceramics, and calligraphy just exploded, reaching incredible new heights. His home, the Topkapi Palace, wasn't just a center of power. It was a buzzing, cosmopolitan hub of culture that pulled in the best artists and thinkers from all over the world. And here's something that might surprise you, a little glimpse into the man behind the curtain. This mighty sultan, this conqueror of nations, was also a passionate poet. He wrote thousands of verses under the pen name Muhibi, which actually means the lover. What a fascinating contrast, right? The ruthless conqueror and meticulous lawgiver was also a romantic poet. But, behind all the shimmer and gold of this amazing era, the palace was a place of deep shadows. It was a world where love and power got tangled up in this crazy web of intrigue, betrayal, and ultimately, tragedy. And right at the heart of all this drama was a woman who would literally change the course of Ottoman history, Hurrem Sultan, known in the West as Roxelana. She started as a slave girl in his harem and somehow managed to capture his heart so completely that he shattered centuries of tradition just to make her his legal wife. Her influence became massive, and believe me, it had deadly consequences. This is the brutal, brutal price of absolute power. Influenced by whispers in his court, many blaming Hurrem's ambition, Suleiman ordered the execution of his own childhood best friend and most trusted advisor, Ibrahim Pasha. Then, years later, terrified of a challenge to his rule, he did the unthinkable. He had his own brilliant, popular son and heir, Prince Mustafa, killed. So as we get to the end of his very long reign, you can see how the two faces of Suleiman really just merge into one. He was a creator and a destroyer, a poet and an executioner. He was a lawgiver who ruled with absolute and, at times, just horrifyingly brutal power. When he finally died in 1566, still out on a military campaign at the age of 71, he left behind an empire of just staggering size. We're talking 15 million square kilometers across 3 continents. To put that in perspective for you, that is more than twice the size of the entire Roman Empire at its absolute peak. His impact was so immense that centuries later, the great Enlightenment philosopher Voltaire looked back on Suleiman's time and called it the height of greatness to which any people have ever attained. Wow. He didn't just rule an empire, he gave it its defining glory. And so that brings us back to our big question. Suleiman was the Magnificent, and he was the lawgiver. His reign gave us some of the most beautiful art and sophisticated laws the world has ever seen. But it was also built on ruthless conquest and heartbreaking personal tragedy. And it really forces us to ask, what is the true price of a golden age? And is it a price we'd be willing to pay?